Canada wrapped up the October window, guys, on Tuesday night, and it was a 0-0 draw against Colombia, coming off a 1-0 loss to Australia. So here's the thing. How did Canada measure up against two top 25 teams, Ollie?
I think overall, despite not winning a game, they measured up pretty well. Like, I don't think Canada looks out of place in these kinds of matches against these kinds of opponents whatsoever. And I think there remains a lot to like about this team, just in terms of the way they compete, particularly when a bigger challenge is thrown at them and they're in a hostile environment. Felt like an away game, obviously, like this one. There's a real athleticism to this side. We know that. There's a real intensity and togetherness in the way they play. I think they're becoming increasingly difficult to play against in terms of their shape when they don't have the ball. And I think you're continuing to see the squads get deeper and deeper. Like, I personally still think Alistair Johnston will be starting at the World Cup. I certainly think Stefan Eustáquio will be starting at the World Cup. But the fact that people are even having these conversations now about Nico Sigur, about Nathan Saliba, like is a completely different place to where this team has been in the past. So I think they're getting deeper as a group as well, which is a really positive thing. On the other side of the coin, if there's a negative, it just continues to be the ability to put the ball in the back of the net in these types of games. And I think there needs to be progress in terms of chance creation and finishing your chances when you do create the chances, which they have sometimes done in these types of games. But I just would have liked to have seen a bit more progress on that front over the past year, because Jesse Marsch again last night said after the game, if we keep being sound defensively, I know this team can score goals. It's the exact same thing he was saying at the Copa America when we kept getting those really tight games where the team was really competing and looked superior a lot of the time, but just couldn't capitalize and put the ball in the back of the net. So that's my kind of concern, if you can call it that, about this group as we enter kind of the final stretch of games now before the World Cup, is can we take that step? Because I think, a lot of people would have been hoping it happens over the course of this year in the two tournaments they played and all the friendlies, and I just don't think we've quite seen it yet.
Yeah, I think I'd agree on a lot of that. I think with Canada, this iteration of the team, I mean, for a while now, it's not been a question of competing with the best. So necessarily when I see results like this, I'm not surprised, because I still think maybe there is, scar tissue from some of the results like Guatemala, that you see a sentiment that people are surprised they drew Colombia. I'm not surprised, but I think it's reassuring to see that they're able to get results like this while sticking to their identity. Jesse Marsch doesn't have to rip up his notebook or tweak things to get these kinds of results. Like, Canada has bought into the style of play, how they want to play. And, they're able to go and execute that to a high level against good teams. So that's important, because I think one big problem that, maybe at the World Cup, or at least after the World Cup, is Canada didn't really have an identity. You couldn't look at them and think, what is this team want to do? How are they going to execute it? What are they good at? They kind of want it to be a bit of everything. And now there's a very clear defined style, that every game they go into, they're going to be physical. They're going to be, good defensively. They're going to press teams. They're going to be direct. And now it's just details, right? They've got the foundation. They've got those sorts of details sorted. How can you take that next step? How can you start beating these teams? How can you start executing your actions, getting the goals? But I do like that the process is good. Like, defensively, that's 4 games now, 1 goal. And it was a routine mistake that I don't think Nico Sigur is going to make anytime soon, especially based on the way he bounced back and was fantastic. But like you mentioned, they've also scored 1 goal in the last 3 games, and it was a free kick from 30 yards that I'm sure Derek Cornelius would love to replicate, but he hasn't got the chance to. So, you do look at those little details. But also, I like that when I was watching this Colombia game, the way I measured it up was Canada got to the final third. And sometimes that's half the battle. There's teams that don't get there. They just didn't execute right. So at least it's encouraging that they're getting the ball to the right areas of the field, but they got to figure out how to execute once they get there. And that's also, that's never easy to do, and something they're going to have to find a way to work on.
Well, let's talk about that execution, because even though they had put up 3 against Romania, that is a team that is lower ranked. We're talking about higher ranked seeds here, because everything is leading to 2026. So how do you explain the lack of goals, Ollie? Is it opponents and you have to give credit to the opponents? Or is it the way Jesse Marsch is deploying the tactics, formation when it comes to Canada?
I mean, of course, it's partially the opponents, because they've been playing against some pretty good teams lately. But I do think they need to grapple more seriously with how do we get more goals in the team? Like, what are the steps that you have to take to to move towards that, as opposed to just kind of hoping it will come because you continue to do the right things and you continue to put in decent performances. Like, I do think there are a lack of sources of goals in this team, and it's very reliant on Jonathan David at times, and that's become a bit of an issue. So you can certainly look at the midfields. Where can they get more goals out of their midfielders? I think Ismail Koney has shown some promise in recent games in that regard, a willingness to get in the box. Tajon Buchanan seems to be taking some steps forward for club and country in that part of his game. But I still think you need to kind of look at that, at those positions and how you get more out of those players in terms of goal scoring. You need to continue to increase the output from set pieces. We've seen that improve as well. So that's a good step in the right direction. But then obviously, the center of the conversation is who's going to play with Jonathan David up front, and how do you get, a second striker going, which hasn't really happened for Canada over the past year or so. And I got to say, I was surprised to see Kyle Larin get the start against Australia, because at this point, and I don't want to join in just piling on Kyle Larin. I'm not saying that he's not still got a future with Canada, that he's not still in the conversation here. But it's very clear at this moment that he is out of form and out of confidence, and probably not fully match fit either, because he's not played a ton in recent months. I think Kyle Larin needs to go back to his club, get his rhythm back, hopefully get some more substantial minutes and start playing his way back into form. And if you're Jesse Marsch and you're telling us that, the time for kind of giving guys opportunities or handing out starts has gone, and it's time to pick the best team on merit and really start to work towards the World Cup, I just don't know at this point how Larin's the choice in that game when you've got 2 matches to split between these two strikers. Over the past year now, since Jesse Marsch took charge for club and country, Kyle Larin has 8 goals in 59 games. Promise David has 31 goals in 59 games. At some point, you've got to have a look at this guy and what he's got to offer in terms of how many goals he's been scoring in Europe and his form there. I understand Larin's been playing in La Liga. That's a higher level. But the level that Promise David has been playing at is no joke. So there continues to seem to be explanations there about fitness, about pressing, this kind of thing. I just think time is running out to really get a proper look at what Promise David can offer you as a starter. And I'm really surprised that we haven't seen more of him. It's little over 2 games in terms of total minutes, 180 minutes or so in his entire time with Canada. That's puzzling to me when you've got Larin out of form as he is, and Tani Oluwaseyi turning in some good performances in a number of regards, but not hitting the back of the net on a regular basis either.
Yeah, I think the Kyle Larin situation kind of sums up, right, where Canada's at, where I feel when they get to the final third, they just kind of expect things to happen, and they aren't. And when that's happening, you have to go and, there's actionable things you can do to create more attacking options. But like with the Larin situation, there's kind of this hope that, okay, he scored a lot of goals a while ago, that he's just going to figure it out, that it's going to happen. And clearly now it's 1 goal in his last 21. Now it's up to appearances for Canada, where he hasn't found the net. It's obviously not been working for him in that regard. But to the point with, the Canadian team itself, I mean, I'm always going to be team extra body in midfield. That's just how I am stylistically. But when I'm watching this game, I'm not thinking that they needed a third midfielder. Interesting. Like, they got the ball to the right areas. To what I was saying about them just kind of wanting things to happen, I just didn't see enough of the little things that help you break down a defensive block. Like, one thing that stood out is Tajon Buchanan. He had an okay game, but he couldn't beat his marker 1v1. And what that meant is, what in a system like this, when you're 1v1 and clearly your defender's having a good day, he wasn't able to create separation. He wasn't able to get the ball in the box. And in that sort of moment, I would have liked to see maybe some overlaps from Nico Sigur, and get him up the field, at least create 2v1s, force the defender to commit, force the defender to do something. Whereas just by constantly having Buchanan isolate, Johan Mojica handled him fine. That you kind of lost a bit on the right side. Then on the left side, Larea was getting up the field, but Canada wasn't able to get the overlaps right, just to create those spaces. Then centrally, when they'd break the line, there'd be a bit of daylight, and then Canada would slow down. Whereas in those sorts of moments, when you see the daylight, you see the striker can you pass him the ball? Can you run off him? Can you have it be 1-2 touch? And too often, Canada were kind of looking for that perfect goal where they were taking the extra second. They were trying to play 3, 4, 5 touches. So I think in the box, there's a lot of little details that I think even go beyond formation. They go beyond who's playing. It felt a little robotic, a bit mechanical, and there's a lot of little tweaks that I think they could attempt to maybe help break down these defensive blocks, because this is a recurring problem. This wasn't anything new that we've seen.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's not just on the coach, it's not just on the players. There's a combination there. I think on Kyle Larin, I'll never begrudge a coach for respecting what a player has done for the team, and you feel like it's his position to lose. But at the same time, I think it's been pretty obvious that these other players have been pushing, and it's time for them to get in. It feels like the World Cup is still kind of far away as we're entering winter. We're just saying goodbye to summer, but it's not. It's around the corner. Yeah. We know how quickly time flies, but I wonder if there is any cause for concern, Ollie, when it comes to the lack of goal scoring, because, is it like a player mentality thing? Or we know Jesse Marsch has been questioned about a plan B before, right? He has a certain way of playing. He has the certain players, like, we had this conversation last night, and we know our pal, Gareth Wheeler is pretty adamant that he doesn't really like Jonathan David in that number 10 role. He wants him playing more as the number 9. But Jesse Marsch doesn't seem like he's going to do that. You just said right now, AGR, you would like to see another body in that midfield, but it just doesn't seem like Jesse Marsch will stray from his path. So is that a little concerning, Ollie, when a coach doesn't seem to be as amenable as we would like him to be?
To an extent, I'm okay with David as a 10. Maybe I'm in the minority on that one now. I know a lot of people have been talking about him playing as a number 9. I'm not saying that there can't be adjustments in his game. Like maybe at times he is coming too deep. He's trying to get too involved in build up, and he can play a bit closer to his strike partner. But like probably the big win, the big triumph of Jesse Marsch's tenure so far has been that Jonathan David has had his best stretch for Canada by a mile, and he's been playing in solely that position. So I don't necessarily subscribe to that completely. I think it's, to answer your question, I think it's kind of both. It's like, I do think they need to, as I said, like really approach, and AGR touched on some of the maybe differences in terms of how they approach goal. I think they need to approach that like they approach the set pieces, like really methodically start to think about that side of their game, maybe bring in some kind of specialist even on that side of the game to help them in that regard in terms of their possession play in the final third. I do think there's a lot of room for improvement there. But I think it's also the players. And like, again, who is going to partner Jonathan David and be a reliable source of goals? Who in midfield is going to contribute goals on a regular basis? For as much as I like Ali Ahmed and for all the good things he does, that's still the one knock on him. Doesn't score many goals. Doesn't, to be honest, get in a ton of goal-scoring positions. Can Jacob Schaffelberg bounce back and be chipping in the way he was, in kind of Marsch's first year in charge? Again, can Tajon Buchanan add that to his game on a more regular basis, as he's shown signs of doing with Villarreal this season? Is there someone else who can come in and potentially give you like a real goal scoring threat from midfield? I'm just not sure that's obvious right now. So as much as you can talk about the tactical side of it, I do think you need to be thinking in team selection. Who are the guys we can rely on to chip in with a goal or two at a tournament? Because right now it's Jonathan David's and who else? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think one thing too to stand out, because when we say it's okay, put Jonathan David in the box, I go, so what? Because when you watch the way this Canadian team plays, they do a lot of crosses. Like that's one thing that's not, like they love to get out wide and whip a ball in the box. Do you want Jonathan David getting on the end of high crosses? Like he's a pretty good header of the ball, but he's not going to be a guy that's bullying his way into the box. He's more of a guy who ghosts and makes late runs anyways. That's where I do wonder where, okay, we talk about Promise David's form. We talk about all the form of all the strikers. This is maybe where we start to talk about stylistic form, because Tani Oluwaseyi, for a lot of the good things he does, like stretch the field and, score goals with his feet. Most of the goals he does score are with his feet. Like in a game where you're playing a low block, the nice thing is when Promise David came in against Australia and Colombia, like he changed the dynamic in the box slightly in a way that Canada wasn't able to get in both games, because he's big, because he can get on the edge of the box. And sometimes I think you have to kind of look at the way the puzzle pieces are shaking out. If Canada is going to be a team that just isolates and whips balls into the box, all of a sudden, like, why not try Promise David out for 60 minutes and consume that strategy? Because I think that's another way to look at the goal scoring solution is if, you're not going to maybe tweak the system to the players that are on the field, then maybe you can put the players in that fit the system a little bit more. And obviously Promise David, you lose things that are key hallmarks of the Jesse Marsch system, such as his pressing, such as the defensive side. But if it gets you to score more goals, these are the sort of trade-offs you have to consider as a coach. So that is something that I'm leaving this window pondering, that yes, Tani Oluwaseyi is the first choice striker to play alongside Jonathan David, but could Promise David be a solution to help score goals the way they're playing? Something I do wonder.
He looks bright to me when he does get on the pitch. There is one more name that we haven't mentioned who could be obviously majorly impactful if he is deployed in this kind of way, which is Alphonso Davies. And this kind of does, to be honest, this continues to push me towards let's try him higher up the field. And I know a lot of people again have gone the other way and said we really like Ali Ahmed's and maybe Davies is locked in at left back now. I'm kind of more tempted than ever to get Alphonso Davies close to Jonathan David, get him close to that forward group and see if you can add another major difference maker, because talent-wise, he's on a different level to anyone else you've got in terms of what he could be. It's just a case if he's going to be that, right, in terms of, really fulfilling his potential in a Canada jersey.
Is that also your way of keeping Richie Laryea in the lineup? If he moves to the left, because Alistair Johnson's going to keep him in the right, like you move Davies up there?
Yeah, for me, I think Laryea is more locked in for me than Ahmed or Schaffelberg or any of the left wing options. I just think he's been consistently excellent. I know he got himself in a bit of card trouble last night, but once again, he's able to navigate it. And Richie Laryea still hasn't been sent off. So until he is, I won't be too concerned about it.
He's definitely getting smart, that's for sure. And I think a lot of people would like to see Richie Laryea stay in the lineup. Well, we got 2 more games coming up in the November window, Ecuador and Venezuela, ranked 24th and 49th. So we'll see how Canada does against those 2 teams in that November window.